In the quiet seaside town of Hyannis, where appearances deceive and mystery lingers in the salty air, one man's daily routine became a phenomenon. 6 wild bobcats, unleashed, uncaged, walked beside him in seamless unity through city streets. Tourists stared in awe. Locals paused mid-step, whispering with phones raised to capture the surreal scene. Experts were left baffled, questioning the improbable bond between man and predator. As this hypnotic procession unfolded each morning, a deeper story, one of grief, resilience, and an unbreakable tie to the wild, began to surface. How could such fiercely independent animals act this way? Was it some elaborate trick, or something far more extraordinary? When wildlife officials started digging deeper, they uncovered a narrative no one expected, a tale of loss, healing, and a connection between human and nature that shattered what we thought we understood. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and tap the notification bell so you never miss a story. The morning sun stretched long shadows across Hyannis Harbor as Osto Marino stepped out of his simple Cape Cod cottage. At 68, his weathered face bore the map of a life lived outdoors, creases etched by time and wind. His thick silver hair caught the light as he adjusted his worn leather vest. But it wasn't Osto's appearance that stopped people in their tracks. It was his companions. 6 bobcats moved in flawless formation behind him, their tawny coats marked with bold spots, tufted ears alert, feline eyes scanning the world with wild precision. No leashes, no restraints, yet they moved as if choreographed, maintaining exact spacing from one another and from Osto, like dancers in a silent ballet. "Morning, Osto," called Eliza Patterson, the harborside coffee shop owner, who had long grown used to the spectacle. "Gonna be a hot one today." Osto nodded, lifting a calloused hand. "They'll want to be back before noon," Healy said, his voice carrying the soft lilt of his Colombian roots, still present after 40 years in Massachusetts. As he strolled on, a mother pulled her child close, whispering in his ear. Osto didn't react, though his shoulders tightened. The bobcats, attuned to even the subtlest shift in him, drew slightly nearer. This had been their routine for nearly a year now, since the day he began walking with all 6 instead of just 1 or 2. It had quickly become a local curiosity, drawing mention in travel blogs and regional news. The Bobcat Whisperer of Cape Cod, they called him, though Osto had never asked for the spotlight. "Hey, mister, how do you get them to do that?" a teenager shouted, phone raised. Osto gave a polite nod but kept walking. The rhythm of the walk mattered too much to interrupt. Leading the formation was Sae, the oldest female. Then came the brothers, Ajax and Apollo. The younger females, Artemis and Athena, followed close behind. At the rear walked Zeus, the largest, male and the last to join Osto's unusual family. A terrier on a leash barked furiously as they passed, straining toward them. The bobcats didn't flinch, not even an ear flicked. Their formation held, undisturbed. "That's not natural." The terrier's owner muttered loudly enough for Osto to hear. "Wild animals don't act like that." Osto was no stranger to comments like that. They stung, but he let them pass. Most people couldn't grasp what he and the bobcats had built together. Fewer still would believe the truth. Marina Della. Cruz watched the procession from her porch, binoculars in hand as she tracked their path down Ocean Street. At 45, Marina had devoted her life to animal welfare. As director of Second Chance Wildlife Rehabilitation, she'd spent the past 15 years rescuing and releasing hundreds of animals. But Osto Marino and his bobcats, they disturbed her. "Still at it?" asked her partner, Diane, handing her a steaming mug of coffee. Marina sighed, lowering the binoculars. 6 bobcats, Diane. Apex predators. Roaming a town without any visible control. It's not just reckless, it's impossible. Diane sat beside her on the porch swing, watching them disappear around the bend. "Maybe he's just that good," Marina shook her head slowly. "No one's that good. Bobcats are solitary. They don't form packs, they don't follow people. Something's off." You think he's hurting them? Diane's voice dropped to a whisper. Marina hesitated. I don't know, but I intend to find out. By mid-morning, Osto had returned to his weathered sky-blue cottage tucked on an acre of wooded land sloping toward a secluded cove. A handmade sign at the entrance read, Merino Wildlife Photography. Contact for appointments. Information for private sessions and limited edition prints hung neatly by the entrance. Inside, the Bobcats spread out across the open-plan living space, each claiming familiar territory. Sai curled up on the window seat. Zeus stretched luxuriously before the unused fireplace, and the others found their usual spots, some grooming in the sun-drenched corners, others already dozing. Osto moved into the compact kitchen, methodically, preparing their meals. 6 stainless steel bowls were lined up on the counter, each labeled with a name. Into each he placed a carefully measured portion of raw meat, mixed with supplements, and in some cases medications hidden in favored treats. Apollo needs his joint supplement, Osto muttered, slipping the capsule into a pill pocket. And Athena's still working on her weight. He added a few extra morsels to her bowl. As he moved through the routine, a photo on the wall caught the morning light. A younger Osto stood beside a woman with bright, laughing eyes and wild black curls. Between them stood a grinning young girl, perhaps 10, flashing a toothy smile. Missing her 2 front teeth. All 3 wore matching ranger uniforms. Osto's gaze lingered there a moment longer before he turned back to the task. The sharp ring of the landline cut through the silence, startling Zeus from his nap. Osto wiped his hands and picked up. Merino Wildlife. Mr. Merino, this is Dennis Foster with Cape Cod Magazine. We'd love to feature you and your, unique companions. Osto's grip tightened. I don't do interviews, Mr. Foster. Thank you, but no. Surely. Good day. He hung up, then unplugged the phone without hesitation. The calls had become more frequent since that viral video hit YouTube the previous month. He returned to the counter, movements quicker, now tension creeping into his shoulders. Zeus patted over and gently nudged his head against Osto's leg. It's all right, old friend, Osto murmured, scratching behind the big cat's ears. Just more noise. After feeding them, he retreated into his small home office where he spent the afternoon editing wildlife photos for an upcoming gallery show. His work had earned quiet praise among conservationists, especially his documentation of the Bobcats' rebound in New England after years of near disappearance due to hunting and habitat loss. As the light began to shift into gold, a knock on the door pulled him from his work. Unusual. Most in Hyannis knew Osto valued solitude. He glanced through the peephole and recognized Marina Dela Cruz. She was a familiar face from town meetings and local news spots on conservation. Inside, the Bobcats stirred, rising, alert, but not alarmed. Osto opened the door halfway. Miss Dela Cruz, what can I do for you? Marina's professional smile was polite, but her eyes held steady purpose. Mr. Marino, I've been hoping to speak with you about your Bobcats. I have some concerns I'd like to raise. My companions are healthy and well cared for, Osto replied, his tone firm. All permits and paperwork are in order. I'm B. Sure they are, she said, though her voice suggested skepticism. But it's their behavior that concerns me. Bobcats don't behave like this naturally. Most experts would say it's impossible without intensive, perhaps extreme conditioning. Osto's expression hardened. Are you accusing me of mistreatment? I'm trying to understand, Marina replied calmly. As someone who's spent her life working with wild animals, I can't overlook something that seems unnatural. Soft chuff came from within the house. Zeus approached the door, curious. Osto gently nudged him back with a foot. My methods are my own, Osto said, voice low but steady. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to finish before dark. Marina hesitated, then extended a card. If you ever change your mind, my door's open, and if your situation changes, we're always available to help animals in need. The message was clear, and Osto heard it. He took the card silently and closed the door. Inside, he leaned against the wall, eyes closed, the weight of the encounter settling on his shoulders. Frustration simmered under Osto's calm exterior. Zeus and Sia watched him from a few feet away, their amber eyes steady and unreadable. "Just what we need," Austo muttered, a crusader. Marina's visit had only been the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks he began noticing a white SUV with the Second Chance Wildlife logo parked at various spots along his usual route. Twice he saw Marina herself, clipboard in hand, observing from a careful distance. Other times it was younger volunteers doing a poor job of hiding their surveillance. Social media attention had surged again. Tourists now gathered at predictable corners along his path, phones raised, whispering excitedly or calling out. Most were respectful, curious, but not all. "Bet they got shock collars under their fur," shouted an older man one morning. "Only way you get wild cats to act like that." Austo never responded. He'd learned silence was better than fuel. Still, the scrutiny wore on him. He began changing his routes, walking earlier or later, skipping some days entirely. But even that seemed to stir more speculation. Then came the letter from the Massachusetts Department of Fish and Wildlife, requesting an inspection. Routine procedure, the language claimed. But Austo knew better. Someone had filed a complaint. He sat at the kitchen table reading the letter, a quiet weight pressing down on his chest. She leapt up beside him, settling close. Her warmth against his arm was grounding. At 14, she was elderly for a bobcat, her muzzle graying, her steps slower. She had been the first, the one who started it all. "They won't understand, see," Austo said softly, his fingers trailing through her fur. "How could they?" She blinked slowly in response, a gesture he'd come to know as affection. Sometimes he questioned himself. Was the bond real? Or had it all been wishful thinking? An illusion born of grief and solitude? But then there were moments like this when her gaze held such clarity, such understanding, that doubt vanished. The inspection was set for Tuesday. 5 days. 5 days to prepare, or to face the decision he'd been avoiding for nearly a year. That night, Austo dreamed of Elena and Sophia again. In the dream they were at Yellowstone, back when they worked together as a family. Sophia, just 11, pointed excitedly toward the trees. "A bobcat, Papa. I saw one." Elena smiled, wrapping an arm around their daughter's shoulders, guiding her binoculars gently, teaching her. Austo woke in the darkness with tears cooling on his cheeks. The cottage was still, quiet, but all 6 bobcats were awake, their eyes reflecting the faint light, watching him with what looked uncannily like concern. Zeus stepped forward, placing his head gently on the edge of the bed, a gesture so tender, so canine in nature, it might have drawn a laugh in another life. "I know what we have to do," Austo whispered, voice thick. "I've been selfish, keeping you here like this. It's time." Inspection day arrived cool and bright. Just after 9 a.m., a small convoy of vehicles pulled into Austo's driveway. Marina stepped out first, followed by a state wildlife officer, a veterinarian, and an animal control representative from the county. "Document everything," Marina instructed quietly as they approached. "If he's using shock collars or control devices, we need to find proof." The wildlife officer, Jenkins, was a seasoned professional with over 20 years in the field. He seemed less convinced. "His permits are all valid. Wildlife rehab, educational exemption, no violations until now. Paperwork doesn't explain how he's controlling 6 adult bobcats without restraints," Marina replied. "It's not natural. I'm concerned for their welfare." Jenkins shrugged. "Let's see what we find before making assumptions." Before they could knock, Austo opened the door. His expression was calm but heavy, like someone carrying more than just. "This moment, please," he said. "Come in, I've been expecting you." They stepped inside cautiously, eyes scanning the quiet space. The living room was clean and quiet. No sign of the bobcats. "Where are they?" Marina asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. "This way," Austo said, leading them through the house and out the back door. The deck overlooked his sloping yard, which led down to the cove. There, in familiar formation, sat all 6 bobcats. Alert but composed, they watched the newcomers with calm intensity, sighing. I approach them? Asked the veterinarian, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Chin who specialized in exotic animals. Of course, Osto said. They won't harm you. She descended the steps slowly, medical bag in hand. The Bobcats watched her, unmoving. Remarkable. She whispered, crouching beside them. Beside Tsai, the elder of the group, Dr. Chin crouched and gently ran her hands along the Bobcat's sides. The old cat allowed the examination without a sound. Eyes calm, body still. She's in excellent health, Dr. Chin said, checking her eyes, ears, and coat. Especially for her age. One by one, she examined the others. With each Bobcat, her surprise deepened. No signs of shock collar use. No evidence of physical discipline, no malnutrition, no stereotypic behaviors. Honestly, they're in better condition than many captive Bobcats I've treated. Marina's brow furrowed, her expression shifting from suspicion to confusion. But how do you control them? She asked, her voice tight. There has to be some explanation. Osto sighed, his gaze drifting toward the cove. The morning sun danced across the water, bright and serene. There is an explanation, Miss Delacruz, but it's not the one you're looking for. He turned to face them, voice steady. These Bobcats aren't trained. Not in the way you think. Marina opened her mouth, but Osto raised a hand. Please, let me finish. What I'm about to share may be hard to believe, but I ask you to listen, with an open mind. He stepped down from the deck and into the grass where the Bobcats shifted slightly, making room for him in their loose circle. 15 years ago, I lost my wife, Elena, and our daughter, Sophia. A car accident, just outside Yellowstone. We were wildlife photographers and educational rangers there. The man who hit them was texting. He survived. They didn't. His voice caught, the pain still raw despite the years. Even Marina remained quiet. After the accident, I couldn't stay. I left Yellowstone, moved here, Elena's hometown. I shut the world out. The only thing that kept me going was continuing our work, photographing wildlife, especially bobcats. Sophia adored them. He knelt beside Sai, his hand resting gently on her back. I found Sai 3 months after I arrived. Hit by a car. She was badly hurt, but alive. I took her in thinking I'd treat her, release her when she healed. He smiled faintly, but she didn't leave. Dr. Chin nodded knowingly. She chose to stay. Yes, Osto said. And more than that, she began to communicate with me. Not in words, of course, but in gestures and presence. When I was lost in grief, she'd bring me things. Strange stones, feathers. She'd nudge me when I'd fall too deep into the dark. It was like she understood. He glanced up. Marina was silent, skeptical, but listening. Over time, I found others. Ajax and Apollo were orphans. Mother killed by a poacher. Artemis came to me after getting caught in a trap. Athena was rescued from an illegal pet trade. Zeus, after a wildfire, scorched his territory. Each one arrived broken, physically, emotionally. And yet, each formed a bond with me. Jenkins, still analytical, asked the obvious. But that doesn't explain the formation. Why they walk together. Why they don't fight. Bobcats are solitary animals. They are, Osto agreed. But something changed. Something I still don't fully understand. He stood again, his voice quiet but certain. My grief, my loss, was a wound so deep it felt like it tore something open. And through that, I could feel them, and they could feel me. Not thoughts, not commands, but understanding. They chose to stay. They chose each other. Over time, they formed a kind of family, drawn together by their connection to me. He hesitated, then added, I have no scientific explanation. No way to prove it, but I believe it. I've lived it. The group exchanged uncertain glances. Osto could feel the weight of their doubt, their disbelief. He didn't blame them. You're asking us to believe you're some kind of bobcat whisperer? Marina said, incredulous. I'm not asking anything. Osto replied gently. I'm just telling you the truth. He gestured toward the bobcats. They follow me because they want to. They walk in formation because they've learned it keeps them safe when we're around people. They don't fight because they're no longer alone. We've all lost something, and somehow, that made us whole together. Dr. Chin, who had been observing the Bobcats closely throughout, finally spoke. Their behavior is extraordinary, she said. In 20 years of practice, I've never seen anything remotely like it. Jenkins nodded slowly. Mr. Marino, regardless of how you've come to this place with them, there's no evidence of cruelty. No signs of neglect or harm. No evidence of illegal activity here, Jenkins concluded. Your permits are in order. The animals are clearly healthy and well cared for. Marina, however, still looked unsettled. But they're wild animals, she insisted. They should be living wild lives, not parading through town like circus performers. Austo's expression softened into something almost mournful. I agree, Miss Dela Cruz, which is why I've made a decision. He turned to address them all, his voice steady. I'm 68 years old. I won't be able to care for them forever. And keeping them here, subject to constant scrutiny and misunderstanding, isn't fair to them. What are you saying? Dr. Chin asked gently. I've arranged for them to be transferred to the New England Wildlife Sanctuary in Vermont, Austo said. They have a 300-acre bobcat habitat, plenty of space, a more natural setting, and they'll still get the care they need, especially those with lingering injuries. The announcement stunned the group, none more than Marina. When? She asked. The transport team arrives tomorrow, Austo replied. Today was our last morning together. The quiet dignity of his words ended any further protest. Even, Marina seemed to recognize the depth of the sacrifice. May I observe them one more time? Dr. Chin asked softly. Their behavior is truly remarkable. It could advance our understanding of these animals. Austo nodded. Of course. For the next hour, the officials stood in awe as Austo moved among the bobcats, guiding them with subtle gestures. No voice commands, no leashes, no rewards. They walked in synchronized steps, responded to the lift of his hand, and formed intricate shapes on the lawn, a size-ordered line, a perfect circle surrounding him. Even brief moments of affection toward strangers when Austo gave his silent approval. Dr. Chin took furious notes, pausing often to shake her head in disbelief. Jenkins watched with quiet respect. Even Marina, once so sure of wrongdoing, seemed deeply moved. I still don't understand how this is possible, she murmured as they prepared to leave. But I can see it now. They're bonded to you. Deeply. Austo offered a sad smile. Sometimes, the heart creates connections the mind cannot explain, Miss Dela Cruz. I lost my human family, and somehow, the universe sent me another. The next morning, the transfer went smoothly. The sanctuary's team was both professional and kind, clearly impressed by the Bobcats' composure and visibly affected by Austo's quiet grief. A small crowd had gathered, locals who had grown fond of the now famous Bobcats of Hyannis. Children held handmade signs. Safe travels, Ajax. We love you, Athena. Thank you, Mr. Marino. When the transport vehicle finally pulled away, Austo remained in his driveway, a solitary figure in the golden morning light. The space around him suddenly vast and empty. Marina approached quietly, her voice hesitant. I misjudged you, she said. I was so sure there had to be something wrong, something cruel or unnatural. I couldn't see that it was something beautiful. Austo nodded, his eyes still on the road where the van had disappeared. They gave me purpose when I had none. They healed me, as much as I healed them. There was a pause, long and uncertain, before Marina spoke again. The sanctuary sent an invitation. They'd like you to visit whenever you wish. And she hesitated. They're interested in having you consult on their Bobcat rehabilitation program. Austo turned, surprised. Really? Your understanding of these animals is unprecedented, she admitted. It would be a waste not to share it. For the first time in days, a true smile broke across Austo's face. I'd like that, very much. 6 months later, Alsto's cottage had been sold to a young family. Their 2 children could often be seen exploring the cove with laughter echoing through the trees. His photography studio had been donated to the local community, college's wildlife conservation program, filled with his work, silent witnesses to the bonds he'd forged, and Alsto himself. He now lived in a small cabin tucked along the edge of the sanctuary grounds in Vermont. Every morning, just after sunrise, he walked the outer edge of the Bobcat enclosure, camera slung over his shoulder, heart a little fuller than the day before, and, sometimes if you looked closely, you might see 6 shadows moving just behind the trees, not following, not commanded, just walking alongside him, as they always had. At the New England Wildlife Sanctuary, Alsto settled into a quiet rhythm of purpose and peace. He divided his time between photographing the resident animals and working with the rehabilitation team, focusing especially on newly arrived injured bobcats, helping them adjust to captivity and, when possible, preparing them for release back into the wild. His original 6 companions had adapted well to their new home. They no longer walked in formation. There was no need in the vast, carefully designed habitat that mimicked their natural environment. Gradually, they began to display more typical bobcat behaviors, becoming more independent as they explored the wooded hills and rocky outcrops of their expanded territory. But every evening, as the sun dipped behind the Vermont mountains and painted the sky in amber and violet, the 6 would gather, one by one, at the section of fence nearest Alsto's cabin. And there, in the quiet glow of twilight, that remarkable bond would manifest once more. They didn't need to be close, they didn't need to be touched. It was enough to be together in silence across the boundary. Visitors often paused to witness the strange, beautiful ritual. Why do they do that? Someone might ask. The staff would smile, gesturing to the solitary man standing just beyond the fence line. He rescued them, they'd explain. He raised them, nursed them back to health, their connection. It's unlike anything we've seen. Some would call it instinct. Others might say magic. Most simply said, Mr. Marino understands bobcats better than anyone we've ever met. What? They didn't say, what perhaps no words could capture, was that in those still golden moments you could glimpse something more, something profound, a reminder that grief, though it breaks us, can also carve out space for healing, for connection, for love. For Alsto, standing quietly as the bobcats acknowledged him from across the fence, these moments were a daily affirmation. A quiet, sacred proof of the truth he had discovered in his darkest hour, that the heart's capacity for connection is limitless, that love can transcend species, expectation, even loss, and that sometimes it is only when we are broken open that we become able to receive the most extraordinary forms of love.